Welcome back to the Red Path. Today we're going to do a unit analysis on jackals. Okay, welcome back to the Red Path. We are doing a unit analysis on jackals, as you may have already gathered. Jackals are a new unit added for our new codex, for as long as we've got it, I guess, with 10th edition coming out. They are a cultist type chaff unit. A cheap unit, 7 points per model. You can take up to 20 of them, between 10 and 20. They've got a few upgrades, like the icon, which I think is definitely necessary. You can upgrade the dishonored to have a skull smasher, and you can upgrade the normal jackals to also have a 2 damage weapon. There's lots of play in how you build them, lots of discussion on whether you run lots of 10s or if you run a couple of 20s. There's definitely some great strategy. I personally like running a squad of 20 and 2 squads of 10 with the icons and with skull smashers everywhere. There was a recent video where Dara talked to Mark of Khorne, one of our top World Eaters players, who actually made a really great point, which I hadn't considered, in throwing all the 2 damage weapons on the large squad of jackals, the 20-man. Really adds the damage output, really increases it, and we'll probably touch on that later. But first of all, we're going to break them down. So let's start off by looking at the data sheet here. So as I've gone over, you can take up to 20 models. They're 7 points a model. You add 5 points for the extra weapons and for the icon. So anywhere between 70 and 165, I believe, will be your top end. Some important things to note here. The dishonored model does get +1 +1 strength natively, and the pack leader gets +1 attack. So a squad of 20 with the skull smashers will get 16 attacks with the dishonored, and then whatever the hell they get, it'll be 18 times 4, which is what, 48, 56, 64, 72 attacks or something like that with the regular jackals. It's a ludicrous amount of output. Now, they do hit on 4s, but you can buff that, and we will go into the tithe buffs that I think are the best for them. So there's the basics. If we next look at their data sheet, which I kind of just touched on, they do move 6. They hit both in combat and shooting, because they do have auto pistols, which is something worth remembering. They hit on 4s, generally strength 3, but that'll be 4 on the charge, or 5 on the charge for the dishonored, and then you can use their special power to bump that up once per game. Toughness 3, which is to be expected from mortals, 1 wound each, 3 attacks base, 4 attacks on the sergeant. Leadership 7 on the unit. You're typically leaving the pack leader till the last, maybe the second last model to pull, and a 6-up save, which again, that's Chaos Cultist equivalents for you. Next, this one's going to be a bit small, but the Jackal icon, a 5-point upgrade. This is quite important to get right, because it's actually a lot more powerful than it seems. First of all, it does open access to the 3d6 charge strat, which is super great on a squad of 20 coming from reserves, especially if you have the +1 charge bonus up. But more importantly, each time a combat attrition test is taken for this unit, if the unit includes any models with the icon, add 1 to the combat attrition test. So what that means, if you start with, say, 20 and you've lost 8 of them, you roll for your morale, you'll probably lose 1, because unless around Scarbrand or something, you'll need a 1 to pass, because they are low leadership. So you will lose 1 to morale. However, because you add 1 to the combat attrition, where if you are over half strength, a roll of 1 would cause models to flee due to attrition, you're adding 1, so those 1s become 2s. This actually does modify this. So at over half strength, unless otherwise modified by an enemy unit, you will not flee on rolls of 1s. So you're actually immune to combat attrition at over half strength for the majority of the time. When you're under half strength, where you would normally flee on 1s and 2s, you will flee on 1s only, because you're adding 1, so the 1s don't count but the 2s do, or the other way around, whatever it is. So basically it's really good. It really helps that attrition get knocked down, and you lose a lot fewer models, considerably more once you're under half strength, for sure. So the stims, this is their bespoke bonus that they can use once per battle. When you select it to fight, so not at the start of the charge phase, not at the start of the fight phase, when you actually select the model so you can kind of judge where the other combats are going, you can declare it will use its stims, and if you do so, roll a d3, and it will take that many mortal wounds, and until the end of the phase, you'll add one to their strength characteristic, which, like I mentioned earlier, will boost up the normal jackals up to strength 5, and the dishonored will go up to strength 6, right? Yeah, I think that's what it is. I don't know. +1 to their strength. Really good for breaking some barriers against T4, your average Marines. It can allow your dishonored to wound a lot of units on 2s, typically kill units on 2s because of the -2 available. So this is a really good thing to use. Again, you can only use it once, but using it at the right time can be absolutely critical. And that pairs really well with one of the blood tithes, which we will go into now. So there are several blood tithes. Let me just fix that. There are several blood tithes that are appropriate for your whole army, really. But if you are looking to fully help your jackals, if you're like spamming them, if you're running a lot of them, or you just really want them to be the sort of key piece of your army, Spiteful Nullification, a 5+ against mortal wounds. Now this is going to be almost an auto take against certain armies, demons, Thousand Sons, Grey Knights. But if you are finding yourself with a healthy abundance of blood tithe, this is great to pick before you actually pop your stims. The reason for that is you'll roll your d3. On average, you're going to take 2 mortal wounds from that, and then you would then be able to use this 5+ Feel No Pain against those, and you've got a decent chance of saving one. So you may actually only lose 1 jackal to their kind of suicidal charge, which is really helpful. The next blood tithe, which I think is absolutely excellent for these guys, is Martial Excellence, Death to the False Emperor, Exploding Sixes, just because their volume. Now there is a very, very long and healthy debate between Exploding Sixes and +1, but I'm actually coming around to the Exploding Sixes. I'm actually sort of building my current army to gain the Exploding Sixes as early as possible. Over the +1. Now +1 is also really good, which I'm going to go on to next, quite frankly. But Exploding Sixes, just because of the volume, is immense. Mathematically, it's almost the same as +1, but when you look at the army altogether, this one really helps. So yep, here we go. Savage Gardens, +1 to hit. Turning those hitting on 4s to hitting on 3s, or if you've got the Mauler Blades or whatever it is, the Jackal upgrade, because they're -1 to hit, they'll go to hitting on 4s. It just really increases the accuracy of your Jackals, making them a lot more killy than they already are, and they're already pretty damn killy. Finally, Warp Blades, increasing the AP. So the Dishonored Skull Smasher is AP2, which is excellent. And the regular chain blades that they have are AP1, which is great on a 7-point model. It's really good because they have, 3-4 attacks each, depending on if they've charged, which they probably have. And then the AP is really good. Like -1 is solid, but -2 really makes them super dangerous against enemies with even a 2+ because it's given them only a 50% save and so on. So this is another really good blood tithe to focus on. I would generally focus on either the 5+ opponent, depending, or the Exploding Sixes first. But then, depending on what you're going against, Warp Blades may be good for your whole army, but if you're going into something like Harlequins and you're ignoring their armor save anyway with everything, you're not going to need Warp Blades, right? So those are the blood tithes I would definitely consider taking. The next part I want to look at is what is arguably the best model in the game, the best data sheet stat line in the entire game on a pure efficiency level. So this is the Dishonored. Alright, sorry Dara, I'm going to have to take your little fella away here. So on the screen you can see a very basic spreadsheet breakdown. I've compared a Dishonored to several enemies, an Orc Boy, a Drakari Witch, a Marine Vanguard Vet, a Chaos Space Marine Chosen, and a Custodian Guard. I've tried to get them as close as possible in points value. So 1 dishonored versus 1 witch and 1 boy, 2 dishonored versus a vanvet, or a chosen really, but I also put in 3 dishonored, and then 4 dishonored versus a custodian guard. You can see that in the first column, points per model. We've got their basic stats there, their move, ballistic skill, weapon skill, strength and attacks. I've included what they are on the charge. I didn't include juicing them up any further, or with any blood tithes or other stratagems or anything else, and that goes for the opposing models as well. I may have got a few stats here wrong because I'm not super familiar with all these armies, and we're just giving them their stock weapons for the most part. I believe Vanguard Vets I gave a single lightning claw. Obviously a thunder hammer is also accessible for them, but anyway, this is just a basic comparison to get an overall general look at what the Dishonored compares to. So, and again, some of the math might be slightly wrong here. I've kind of rounded up where possible, number of hits and wounds versus a standard Marine at T4, 3 up save, and 2 wounds. So if we look at the final column, MEQ kills per point, a boy doesn't kill a Marine, just a single boy at 8 points. A witch doesn't either. I think they both do 1 damage though. A Dishonored just kills a Marine, kills 2 Marines, which gives him a very, very high points or ratio there. A Vanguard Vet will kill 1 Marine. 2 Dishonored for almost the same points will kill 3 Marines, which is pretty nuts. A Chosen will kill 2, but 3 Dishonored will kill 5. A Custodian Guard will kill 2, but 4 Dishonored will kill 7 Marines. Now, obviously, you can't run 4 Dishonored in a squad, but it's if you've got 2 squads of 20 Jackals going into a big squad of Marines, say Desolators right now, you are tearing them a new one, because then you've got all the other attacks which are going to be doing absolute damage as well. But the Dishonored themselves, just the single model at 12 points per model with the Skull Smasher, is incredibly efficient. I mean, look at the final column there, 0.94. Those numbers, the 94, 92 and 93, should all be the same. It's just because the rough math in the versus MEQ column is just rounded up for the general, for the most of it. The next best sort of efficiency wise is going to be a Chosen at 0.88, then a Vanguard Vet at 0.8, and then a Custodian at 0.78. And then because the Boy and the Witch didn't really get a kill, the number skewed. I really couldn't be bothered to do any more to it. But yeah, at a points per model efficiency, Dishonored are absolutely superb. They are incredible for what you pay for them. And the regular Jackals are as well, of course. They're just not quite as killy, but their volume, their ablative wounds, they're tagging enemy units, they're just causing a lot of mayhem. And then you add in OBSEC on top, and it gets pretty ridiculous. So let's put our cheeky little cultist back up. So we've gone over the basics here. There's a lot of strategies you can use. Like I mentioned, I like to run a squad of 20 and 2 squads of 10. The squad of 20 from Strategic Reserve is wonderful. It's not always going to pay off, because if your opponent is able to screen you, especially if you go first, so you kind of don't have quite the momentum you normally would, they can screen you out with cheap units. It's quite a common tactic and the appropriate way to deal with reserves. But it's still only 155 points, so getting them into a position by charging a cheap chaff unit and probably killing it is pretty tasty, because then you're just causing a huge amount of bodies to be in an annoying area for your opponent. And with OBSEC, you can use the pile-ins and consolidates and any other free movement you've got to touch objectives and really harm your opponent's primary score and things like that. And the squad of 20 will very typically kill what it touches. I think in my last RTT, I charged it into a Land Raider Achilles. I was playing against Iron Hands, and they had an Achilles, which was amazing because I did as well. And they did 8 or 9 damage on the charge to that Achilles. Now, it did get healed up because it was Iron Hands, but just being able to really damage that model was it felt really good. And they've done a lot of work in other games. They clear screens absolutely beautifully. They'll take down larger models. I play against Death Guard. I play against Don Huson's Death Guard quite frequently, and they've gone into the plague drones. They've killed a couple of those over the last few games. They do get picked up really easily. That's fine. But although I didn't bring it up earlier, the regular 6-up Feel No Pain can actually be really obnoxious on your Jackals, because whilst they're only T3 with a 6-up T-shirt save, that's 20 individual wounds. So they're a really bad target for heavy weapons, which is something that's out there a lot in the kind of Iron Hand Space Marine meta we've got. Now, obviously, a lot of heavy weapons can put out a little bit of DACA as well, but you throw in that Feel No Pain, you get some clutch 6s, it really reduces the efficiency of your opponent's shooting. Finally, I just want to kind of talk about their sort of upgrades. As I mentioned earlier, Mark Whittaker talked about putting the additional weapons on them, and that really does make them incredibly brutal. That kind of volume of damage to weapons, even with low accuracy, can be spiked with the 6s exploding and the +1 to hit. Maybe set to defend occasionally comes up as well, so you can theoretically get those upgrades hitting back on 3s with 2 sets of +1 and only 1 set of -1. And just the equipment they can bring to bear against marine type enemies, 2 wound enemies basically, is oppressive and obnoxious, and they can be deceptively tanky because, like I said, 20 wounds across a squad of 20 is a lot of stuff to chew through if they don't have enough small arms fire, or they don't have the right accuracy, or what have you. Bringing them in on a flank where the opponent doesn't have the strength to deal with them in the shooting phase is really the play. And you can bring multiple squads out from reserve because you'll be able to do the 3d6 charge, twice from reserve in turns 2 and 3. So you can get a lot of board control, put a lot of pressure on your opponent by strongly using your Jackals from reserve. They're also a great unit in squads of 10 to stick in a Rhino. Shove that Rhino up the field. Your opponent probably has to deal with it, for primary purposes or getting their own kills or something. But then you've got 10 OBSEC models minus any casualties from the explosion jumping out. You've probably positioned that, hopefully, next to a ruin or next to an objective, so it's going to cause another problem when they do get out of that Rhino or whatever other transport you're running. Some other plays are 10 in a Dreadclaw for a turn 1 sort of pressure alpha strike because of the icon again, and because opponents will typically put their cheap screen. You don't necessarily want to be wasting your 8-bound or berserkers in their screening unit, so a squad of 10 Jackals with a 3d6 charge have got a fairly good chance of making it in. With a reroll, you're, I think, up in the 70% chance of making that turn 1 charge from 9 inches. 3d6 with a reroll is costing you 2 CP, and they are a squad of 10 is not going to trade as well because you're not going to have the buffs up in turn 1, but it's still enough to destabilize and cause some problems, get you really quick blood tithe points because they will die very quickly. There's just a lot of great play. They've got a lot of utility and versatility in how you can use them. You don't feel bad keeping them back, doing actions on your home objective or screening your backfield or what have you, because a squad of 10, anywhere from 70 to 85 points doesn't feel bad because your spawn are just generally running up literally to die or cause problems, and don't have the biggest amount of a footprint to screen, whereas Jackals do. So yeah, let me know in the comments your thoughts on Jackals for World Eaters, if you've used them to great success, if you've got any other tricks or advice on things you feel that the community should know about. If you're not in our Discord, join the Discord and let us know in there as well. We're always talking about these things, trying to come up with new strategies and ways to fully maximise our codex. Okay, so that's it for this one. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful. Hopefully maybe taught you a little something or taught you how to play against Jackals if you're not a World Eaters player. Either way, again, please join the Discord. We'd love to have you in there. Check us out on Spotify, on Twitch. Dara's been doing a crazy amount of painting streams on Twitch recently. All the links are below, and if you'd like to support us, we do have a Patreon. You can buy our objective markers and yeah, everything else. But until next time, folks, stay healthy, stay safe, and remember.